The question mark is good at doing that. And then there's the editing. The files are the questions are embedded in whole files, so you can edit a whole exercise file at once, rather than trying to look for individual questions that you want to edit and treating them one by one, as tends to happen in virtual learning environments. So you can, for example, look for all of the occurrences of a particular word in a whole large exercise of many hundred questions, and decide how you want to rejig those particular questions in the file. The concept of wiki editing is for students to be able to contribute to this process of improving their learning resource themselves. The students can update the questions and correct and explain points. I'll just show you the way that this is done. Just showing the page here where the students access the wiki access. There's a certain number of exercises we have are available for students to modify, not all of them. And there is a set of rules here. I don't expect you to read all this, but a set of rules about students not doing this on their own. They should involve at least one other student who knows something about the subject, and they should discuss it. And they should, if they're unsure about the issues at stake, they should involve a teacher who currently teaches the subject. The students are in a very good position to do this kind of thing, because the students know exactly who teaches what on their course, and they know who to go to. For me, as a person who set some of this up, I often don't know who's teaching in a particular topic this year, because it changes from year to year, and it's very difficult for any other people to keep track of that too, even more deeply embedded in the course. So this is the kind of, this is at an early stage. We have set this up in order to try to encourage staff to do this as efficiently as possible, but it was only set up in January, and this time of year has not been a very good time of year for the students to, as they're working for exams, to start working on this. So just I want to discuss a little bit whether the certainty-based marks that come out of it really are sensible things to be thinking about in relation to assessing the student's knowledge. Psychologists talk about something like how sure you are of an answer as an aspect of metacognition. But I think it's more than that. It's not something that is just above your knowledge, and you may have a judgment about whether it's a good or a bad answer. In fact, the notion of whether you're sure about something is really fundamental to the definition of knowledge. To anybody familiar with epistemology, then the definition of knowledge is a function of degree of belief, and this is reflected in the way in which we use ordinary words here. If you're sure of something and you are getting it right, then you have knowledge for it. If you're getting it right, but you're not sure of it, then you have uncertainty about it. You may simply not know at all and say that you're ignorant about it, and that's perfectly acceptable. But there are situations that are far worse than that. You may be completely sure of something and it be wrong, and then that's a delusion, or you may be sure of something, but it is actually wrong, and that's a misconception. These are words we use about this, which illustrate how sure you are about what's true and how sure you are about what's false, are what determine the way in which we describe the various aspects of knowledge. And an important thing about this that isn't brought to ordinary marking is that there are things that are a lot worse than not knowing the answer to a question. If you think you know the answer to the question and you're actually getting it wrong, as Billings was a contemporary of Mark Twain, and he expressed this rather nicely by saying, "It's not ignorance does so much damage, it's knowing so darn much that ain't so." This is the -6s of life, where you think you know something, but you're wrong, and you're going to lead yourself into problems as a result of that. So, should you use CBM in exams? Well, it's a good measure of knowledge or ignorance. The amount by which you fall short of 3 marks is a good measure of ignorance. It's funny to talk about marks as being a ignorance rather than a measure of knowledge, but I don't want to go into the mathematics of this, but this the ideal sort of logarithmic measure of how much ignorance you have about a topic is actually fairly close to the marks from 3 marks down to -6 marks that you get on the certainty-based marking system. Unless people wanted to talk about that, I shan't go and tell about that. We've used this for 5 years in exams, and it's very interesting that looking at the data that you can add the data from the exams both by just using the % correct or by using the CBM marks, and you can look at what people call the reliability of the exam marks based on this. The reliability is an indication of how well you're measuring something about the student, how well a good mark reflects a good performance by the student rather than just a chance good luck on the part of the students in relation to the particular choice of questions or something like that. It's a measure of to what extent the exam performance, the mark, predicts how well the students would do on another test. And you can see that for all of these exams that we've analyzed the data for here, the reliability based on the certainty-based marks is substantially, is greater, quite substantially greater on average than it is using just the conventional percentage correct here. You can always improve the reliability of an exam by increasing it, by writing more questions, asking more questions. And the improvements here in reliability correspond on average to having written an exam with about 58, more than 50% more questions in it. So it's a big savings in the amount of examining you would have to do to achieve the equivalent reliability of the tests. And even if you felt that the certainty issue is not something that you want to bring into how well you regard particular students, you want to judge them simply by how many they get correct on an exam, you can ask the question, if you're trying to predict how many a student will get right in the odd-numbered correct questions in an exam, if you're trying to predict how many of the odd-numbered questions they get right, and you're going to use the answers from the even-numbered questions to try to predict that, you're better off to use the CBM marks than to use the % correct on the even-numbered questions. The correlation coefficients are high in all of these exams for the certainty-based marks from the one set of questions. They're better predictors of the number they get correct on the other set of questions. So even if your gold standard is how many questions a student gets right, regardless of whether they know if they're reliable or not, even if that's your gold standard of knowledge, if you like, then you're better to use the certainty marking marks from another test in order to try to predict that. So are there reasons one should have reserves about using CBM in exams? One thing is that you certainly need a lot of practice with the CBM. The students need to get used to it. You need lots of self-tests for them to be able to get familiar with the system, because you can't just launch into it and expect to use it sensibly. There are students who have poor calibration. I think I'm going to skip over the next slide probably at the moment, but we could talk about that a little bit. There are students, a few students at the bottom of the scale who are going to, typically students who are going to fail anyway, who tend to use C=3 much more than they should do. They have an exaggerated hope that they actually may be getting things right, when in fact they have very poor knowledge about them. One of the things that I've worked on quite a bit is trying to make it easier for people to deal with standard setting, a big issue in exams these days. You have notions with your conventional approach about how you set a pass mark, and if you switch to using CBM, then you need to be able to convert that to the new approach. And you can do that by sensible scaling of the marks so that you actually get equivalent marks for the bulk of the students, and you can set an equivalent level to compare exams in different years. The last thing, which is a silly but a serious problem, which is that exam boards do tend to be very conservative and reluctant to experiment. This is a bit, I say this is a bit silly, because actually the CBM exams, they yield all the same data that you get from a conventional exam. So you're just adding something to what you get out of an exam, and you're still, you've got all the information about how many answers the students have got right. The thing that worries me about not using CBM in exams is that the way that students are examined is a very strong determinant of the way that they will actually study. If you do use CBM in exams, as we did for 5 years in UCL and until they changed the whole system for examining somewhat, and they abandoned this along with abandoning true-false questions, in fact. If you have a different system in the exams from what there is in the self-tests, then the students are less motivated to
sorry, Tony, you've faded away there. Has something happened to your mic? Yes, that's fine. Please go ahead.
Testing.
That's fine, Tony.
There's something funny. No, there's something funny happening because I get a. Didn't used to happen. Okay, so this was my last slide, I think, really, just discussing why everybody doesn't already use CBM here. And these are some ideas. One is that there was quite a lot of research on various aspects of probability judgment and confidence judgment, along with marking of tests from the 50s, or particularly in the 60s, I think, by psychologists. But it wasn't really very practical to use things very efficiently at that time, and things are much easier now. Something we've been concerned about is that a lot of the kinds of CBM-related techniques that have been used haven't been motivating in the sense that I was talking about, where really it's in your best interest to acknowledge uncertainty when you are uncertain. They haven't really had that feature built into them, so they've relied on your being honest just out of a sense of honesty, rather than in order to get the most marks from the system. This point about reluctance to treat certainty as integral to knowledge, I think it's really something that appeals to people, that they understand when they actually use certainty-based marking. And I'd encourage you to have a look at the website here, and do email to me if you've got any kind of issues with doing that. Because it's only through experiencing it really that you get the hang of it, I think is fair to say. This personality bias is something that I think people were worried about, and it's something that, to the extent that there are very diffident people who are very reluctant ever to say they're sure of an answer, or that there are rather sort of macho personality types who will say they're sure about something even when they're not. These people are going to be are going to do badly on certainty-based marking at first. They're going to do badly until they realize that they have to calibrate their own attitude to certainty better in order to get good marks. And so this personality, the extremes are a serious problem. If somebody never really has the confidence that they are actually getting to grips with the subject, they won't get on well in the subject. And CBM is one of the ways that you can actually perhaps help to deal with these problems in people's individual attitudes to their knowledge. The self-tests is something that I've tried to emphasize today, the importance of them as learning tools. This is a non-worry, but something that people often bring up. They need to write new questions for certainty-based marking. It's a good idea to write new questions for self-testing, because in the ways that I talked about at the beginning, that self-tests have their own strategies that you can use in order to try to improve the value of them as learning tools. But